If you're getting into hockey for the first time, I want to talk about captains. Captains are a really important thing for understanding how hockey works. Not just the rules of the game, but the culture behind it. How teams are structured, what players prioritize. And while I'm going to use examples from the NHL, the rules for captains are similar across different leagues in hockey. The main thing about captains in the NHL is that they have actual authority in the rulebook. You have captains in lots of sports, but for the most part, these are just symbolic ceremonial roles. In football, you'll have captains on both sides of the ball, and they're out there for the opening coin toss, but they don't really have any other role other than that. Yeah, they're leaders in the locker room, but you don't need to wear a letter to be a leader. In baseball, Derek Jeter was the captain of the Yankees, but this didn't really have any relevancy to the sport. It was sort of something that was true in the Yankees clubhouse that people talked about, but it's not like Derek Jeter was treated any differently. In hockey, captains play a whole bunch of different roles. They're the ones that are setting the tone in the locker room. They might be the ones making sure young players have places to live. They're making sure everyone feels involved. And they're setting an example out on the ice. And those are all well and good, but the most important thing a captain does, and the thing that's actually in the rulebook, is that captains are the ones that can go out and talk to the officials. Any call is made on the ice, a penalty, an icing, whatever, the captain is the one that can actually go to the refs and talk about what happened. They can advocate for their team, they can hear the ref's explanation, and they can relay that back to the rest of their team. A team is allowed to dress one captain and two alternates. While the captain usually remains the same for long stretches of time, the alternates sometimes rotate. A team may have 5 or 6 players that wear the A throughout the season, sort of switching off game to game. And a team isn't required to have a captain. Teams will sometimes go years without a captain. The Vancouver Canucks started the season with Quinn Hughes as their captain. He was traded to the Minnesota Wild earlier in the season, and the Canucks haven't replaced him as captain yet. If a team doesn't have a captain, then they generally dress 3 alternates who can all talk to the ref. But they're waiting to give that C role to someone who really deserves it in the locker room. But the captaincy doesn't just change when someone leaves a team. Sometimes it's handed over, sort of in a ceremonial fashion. John Tavares and Austin Matthews are both currently on the Leafs. Tavares used to be the captain, but then a few years ago they gave it to Matthews. Tavares and Matthews are still on the team together, but it sort of got to the time when the organization said, okay, it's time for Austin to be the leader in this team. We need to hand this over to a younger generation, and we need Austin, who is our best player right now, to be the one that the players look to for an example. This was a fairly positive handover, sometimes it's more acrimonious. In the 90s, the Flyers very publicly stripped Eric Lindros of his captaincy and gave it to another teammate. And they were pretty critical that they didn't like his leadership style and they wanted a new direction. And this sort of thing still happens. Blake Wheeler here was the captain of the Jets for 6 seasons, and then a few years ago they stripped it of him. Sort of saying, we want to reset in our leadership, we need a new approach, a new voice in the locker room. There are a few different approaches teams generally make when picking a captain. And there's one type of player that teams will never pick as a captain. One approach is the grizzled veteran. The Flyers captain is Sean Couturier. He's not one of the Flyers' best players at this point, but he's been there a long time. He's seen just about everything in hockey. He's a calm, steady voice in the locker room. And he plays the game the right way. He hustles, he's going to chase for pucks, he's going to set an example for younger players. This sort of model is the leader of men model of captaincy. Gabriel Landeskog is the captain of the Avalanche, and he's missed entire seasons recently due to injury. He's not their best player, but he's probably their best leader. The other approach is to go with your best player. Some teams like to have a star player as captain. One advantage of this is that the star player talks to the ref every game, and because of this, they may be more likely to have calls go their way during a game. And if you're going to be successful, you're probably going to need your best player to be a good leader. Connor McDavid was named captain of the Oilers at 19. I think a lot of people question this move. Was he too young? And I think he questioned himself, like, how can I lead a locker room when my mom is still doing my laundry? But he was the Oilers' best player on the ice, even at that young age. So getting named captain gave him the time to develop into a leader of a team that's actually now very good. And then there are some players that are just born leaders. Sidney Crosby was named the captain of the Penguins at a very young age and led the team to a cup at 21 years old. And this is the type of player that's going to be the captain of any team he's on, from the juniors to the Olympics to any sort of National Hockey League team. Now, a question you may have is, can a goalie ever be named captain? And the answer is technically no. A goalie in the NHL and most leagues can never wear a C on their jersey. And that's largely because they have to talk to the refs, and it was just determined a long time ago that it takes too long for a goalie to skate down the ice and talk to the refs and get back to their crease. It's sort of like a dumb technical reason, but it's stuck. It's an official rule. I think there's also considerations that a goalie is not going to set the tone in the same way because their role on the ice is different from the rest of the team. But despite this, many goalies, of course, are leaders in the locker room. This is Hall of Fame goalie Roberto Luongo. He was actually an unofficial captain of the Vancouver Canucks for a period of time. He officially couldn't wear the C, but he was the leader in the locker room, and he added a C to his goalie mask. One thing about captains is that when you talk to NHL players about it, they take it very seriously. There are players that would sign with a certain team if it meant that they could be the captain. And being the captain of a historic team like the Canadiens or the Maple Leafs means something to those players. So yeah, there are leaders, and in fact there are captains in other sports, but in hockey, it's a real thing that the players care about. Also, as a fan, it means that you can buy a jersey with a C on it. And you know teams love any excuse to sell more jerseys. Please follow along for more important hockey information.